think of anyone who has made single most contribution to the issue of migration, I think undoubtedly it is Professor Rajan. And I know there is a speaker will be introduced properly, and I met her in the morning, and I think there will be a formal introduction. I think I'm sure you will be doing that.
We'll do that.
Yeah, no. And I am supposedly speaking until the moderator comes, because in some meetings a moderator is important. When people like me are there, who normally very difficult to control. So the question is they taken up, but I said migration and development, a strategic global asset at risk. I think the title of the seminar reveals as much as it can. I don't think that we could have chosen a title much more revealing than what has been taken. And when you're talking about migration and development, it is a process which is contingent on the space that you talk about, the place that you talk about, and also it is contingent on the time that you're talking about. The time that we are talking about today, because we are talking about 40 years, more than 40 years of neoliberal policy reforms, which was religiously embraced by the developing countries in the global south. They have opened their doors. In fact, in one of my recent papers, I argued that the globalization, we can think of true globalization and partial globalization. What is true globalization? True globalization is the removal of all the man-made restrictions in the mobility of factors of production, all factors of production, all commodities and all services. Then what we have had the last 40 years is the removal of the man-made restrictions on everything where the North has the comparative advantage. Capital is free. Finance is free. Technology is free. Who has comparative advantage over there? North. What about labor? As Amartya Sen says, the labor power for most of humanity, the only thing that they have to sell is the labor power that they have, as far as the people in the South are concerned. What about labor mobility? That has not been. Labor is not free. One wherein developing countries have got comparative advantage, that is labor power that has been not made free, others are free. That is what I call it as partial globalization. In fact, we know that unequivocally it is said that the outcome, of course, some of the countries have learned the art of making high growth rate, but that high growth rate is proven to be unsustainable because of the exhaustible, the excessive exploitation of the exhaustible resources. So it is unsustainable. That is why UN has come up with the Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Equally important is inter-country, intra-country inequality has crossed the limits that any human society can tolerate. It is unequal, unsustainable, and it is in this context today, the world which is unequal and unsustainable, which we inherited from the 40 years of neoliberal reform, is confronted with a world which is unpredictable and unstable. We don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. There is no hesitation on the part of any country to wage war against any other country. The multilateral institutions that we have developed with a lot of effort, they are remaining as passive spectators. It is in this context that we are talking about the global, the strategic global asset. When you are talking about, I don't want to elaborate. In fact, when you are talking about migration and development, for any student of economics, the name that comes to our mind is the work of 60s by Michael Todaro and Harris, John Harris. They were concerned about intra-country, mostly intra-country, within a country migration. While you are having increased unemployment in the urban areas, why people are again rushing to urban areas? That's a puzzle for them. That's what That is what induced them to look into that. But what we are actually concerned about is today is the inter-country migration, immigration. And there are different ways of looking at that. When you talk about, I also worked on trade. As a trade tourist, we have got Neary and Corden. They have got an analytical framework, what is called, it goes back to specific factors model that is actually relaxation of the, many of them are not economists. So Neary and Corden kind of framework that led to, that's a kind of argument saying that, this outflow of out migration and inflow of resources. Money comes in, people go. So it is often seen as something very, very, very benign. In the case of Kerala, for example, the common story that has been moving around was that, look, since 70s, we have a situation wherein Gulf boom, a lot of people were going out. Agriculture has been declining, industry has been declining. Because people are going out and bringing money, Kerala survived. Otherwise, you would have been, നമ്മുടെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ വലിയ കഷ്ടമായി പോയനെ. Professor Harilal, who is going to be the moderator of the session, and me, we worked on a paper wherein we argued that, in fact, the whole stagnation in Kerala economy since 1970s is because of the migration. When people went out, what happened? There is who went out is basically carpenters, and the carpenters are masons. These are the people who are working in the Gulf. This thing, they went out. So we are a state which is almost 70 to 80% of what we produce is sold outside. You take your cashew or coir or cardamom or your all those, 80% export. So when these people went out, there was a labor shortage happening here, particularly of masons and others. When a lot of money was coming in, construction boom was going on here. So within a matter of decade, the wages of construction workers increased, if I remember correctly, 200 times. In a labor market, when somebody will say, sir, if I go and work and stand in the work site, I will get this many rupees. Agriculture labor will say, you give me 200 rupees, because labor being a mobile factor, there is what is called a labor market wage equalization. So the cost of production, wage cost went up, cost of production went up. So you have no other way to be internationally competitive. Your international companies are adversely affected. All the more importantly, there was also a spending effect when the prices went up. This is a typical saying that, okay, suppose you go to a fish lady, somebody says, this is 1,000 rupees. Hey, sir, this is how much is 1,000 rupees? Then they will say, no, sir, you go away. I have the Gulfi coming. He will buy it. So the price level in Kerala was systematically, inflation level was higher in Kerala. Higher inflation actually induced higher wage bargaining. So, okay. So I should stop now. So I was talking about our paper. So this resource movement effect on account of the outflow of labor force and spending effect, because spending effect and high prices that adversely affected the international and the competitiveness of the domestically productive sectors. So what we are arguing is that, but at the same time, that means that's actually one phase of Kerala's development. But then came another phase. People who went out, they started coming back. They came back not with money, they came with ideas. That is what the endogenous growth model says. They came back with ideas and objects in Paul Romer's language. So that is the phase actually from mid-90s. We can say that you have Sahadullahs and, I don't want to use any name. You have Kims and Nims and, Menons and so many. And that actually the kind of investment that they have made and the contribution that they have made, and Kerala's improved higher growth rate is not well documented, or it has not received the attention that it really deserves. So this is an important area. And today, when we are talking about it, we are having a situation of the massive exodus of young generation out of the state. This is a major problem. So what we need to know is that according to another framework, which we often use in innovation system, knowledge is the most important resource of the modern economy. And these non-resident Keralites of our friends, and they are enormous amount of knowledge, both scientific knowledge and documented knowledge. And the future of Kerala, if we are not making use of that, instead of people going out of the state, we should make a situation. I don't think that we can ever prevent migration. We should make what is called drain to brain, gain and main circulation. That is more of a dynamic process. So how can we do that? And in all these process, in all this, migration can play an important role. So with this, I have great pleasure in welcoming, of course, Professor Rajan once again. He is also our distinguished professor of Gujarat Institute of Finance and Taxation, and Dr. Mary Macleaf, and of course, Professor Kharilal, and all of you joined online and offline for this program. So I think I will now hand over to Professor Harilal. You and yeah. Oh, Dr. Harilal will introduce me. So, introduction to yeah.
Friends, I'm supposed to moderate this session, and I think Professor Joseph has already given a fairly long speech because I was in the traffic block and I was talking to Professor Joseph, so he was going to begin at that point of time, and now it's almost 10 minutes since then, so probably he spoke about at least 5 minutes. So I'm not going to make a speech here in the beginning because we are all very keen to listen to these two speakers. And therefore, let me congratulate, first of all, Dr. Mary and Dr. Irday Rajan for bringing out this migration report, focusing on a strategic global asset at risk. It's a great effort. And in fact, I am personally very keen to listen to them, to read this report, because this is something which is, as Professor Joseph was telling, very important for Kerala. In fact, the global economy is taking a major turn. Things are changing very fast. And a lot of discussion is taking place related to movement of capital, trade in merchandise, etc., etc. But unfortunately, we don't hear much about people, movement of labor, movement of people, and what kind of risk they are encountering in the context of global turn. Just now, when we are organizing this meeting, several lakhs of Keralites are in the Middle East, and we don't know what is going to happen to them. Many of them have already lost jobs. They are all suffering from wage cuts, and uncertainty is looming large in the Middle East. And more or less the same is true of many other migrant recipient countries, because global economy is in a recession, and it's going to be, the crisis is going to probably deepen. And for all migration sending communities, it's going to be a tough time ahead. And in fact, one doesn't know how Kerala is going to manage if things are turning worse. And therefore, this is the right topic at the right time, and we are going to discuss this. That's why I'm looking forward to this contribution and presentations. Of course, then we will all have a lot to contribute to the discussion. So let me invite both of you. How we are going to go ahead and make the presentation, etc. Yeah. PowerPoint.
Thank you, both Professor Joseph, Director, Gujarat Institute, for Then I wrote to him that I would like to have the seminar here, without any hesitation, he said yes. That's very, very nice of him because we were thinking where to do this seminar. And then I thought we should do it along with Kerala Economic Association. Then I wrote to Harilal also. So he said yes. So
The former president.
as the former president of KE and honorary faculty of KIPT. So I think both of them said yes. I think I want to thank both of you because very important. Also, I want to thank all the audience, both online and offline. And today presentation is that because Dr. Mari will be here for basically she's on field work with us on a business visa. Otherwise, if she do field work, somebody will ask her, why are you doing field work? You have no visa. So she's with a field business visa to visit India to look at migration issues, planning project with some institutions. So she's on the visit, she has a visa for a year now. And also we have a visa for going to Sri Lanka, business visa. So we are doing a study between Kerala and Sri Lanka looking at evidence-based policy. That's why she's here. And this was not in our agenda to have a seminar because we don't know what to speak when she's there. But she was part of this World Migration Report for almost last 10 years. And she said it was released 2 weeks back. Now we can talk. It's not released, you cannot talk, like the. So she said, now we can talk. Then I said, yes, we can talk. And, I was not part of the World Migration Report for, nothing like that. But 2004 and 2006, I was part of a chapter in that World Migration Report. And this time again, I was part of the chapters. Then I thought she can speak the broader World Migration Report. Then probably I'll speak few minutes on the strategic assets because I believe that the assets are in trouble, like what Harilal said, both the diaspora assets as well as the migrant assets, remittances. So we'll open it up for discussion. So I request Mario to speak the broad, on the World Migration Report, what's happening in the world probably, because this is one of the report probably highest downloaded in the world now, World Migration Report 2026. And also it is like open access. Anybody can download anywhere in the world. It's also available in few languages. Of course, we read English. We don't need to download French. So in the sense, it's also available in several languages. Of course, she will discuss about that. So I'll ask her to give you a presentation, then followed by I'll speak for some time on the chapter which we have done together. Marie, yeah.
Great.
I can move this or she can move that. No, I can move this computer. Am I right?
Yes, move.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for hosting us today to GIFT and to IMAD. And thank you everybody for joining online as well. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Mari McAuliffe. I have recently finished at the International Organization for Migration. I started 10 years ago at IOM. I'm based in Geneva in Switzerland and was asked to head up the Migration Research Division and also edit the World Migration Report. So as Rajan mentioned, I have been editing the report for a decade now and completely reviewed and revised it so that it could speak to audiences everywhere around the world and was a genuine world migration report, not a global north migration report, which in some respects it had become. And so that it could speak to the broad umbrella topic of migration. What had been done previously was very specific topics that were quite narrow, and we needed a global reference report that could speak to a whole range of different topics given the complexity of international migration and displacement. So with the work of many, many colleagues around the world, including Professor Rajan, all the way around the world, we've been able to develop the World Migration Report into a global reference report with support from donors, private sector, member states, and also done enormous amount of work on translations, which I'll take you through. So as Rajan said, I will take you through the World Migration Report series, and then the chapter that we worked on together, which is the first time that we've had a foundational migration and development chapter in the World Migration Report series. Rajan and I worked on that together with a colleague from the Gambia and another colleague from Ecuador to round that out. I do have to mention that obviously the views that I express are not those of IOM, and I'm actually not an employee of IOM anymore. So the presentation I'll take you through the World Migration Report series, look at some of the key global transformations, which we've heard about actually already this afternoon. that are shaping migration and displacement all around the world in real time. It's certainly sped up in the last few years. We'll talk about how important migrants and diaspora are to international migration. They are, fundamentally the most active and the most successful actors around migration and development. And we'll look at the 2026 edition. As Rajan mentioned, it was released less than 2 weeks ago in New York at the International Migration Review Forum that was held at UN headquarters by IOM. So this is the World Migration Report sort of series. It started in the year 2000, initially under the Director General, Brunson McKinley, as a one-off report. It was like, we need some evidence. We need to know what the data says, what the trends are, what the global trends are, particularly around globalization, as we've heard about already this afternoon, to look at how migration was being shaped, what was changing, what was occurring. It was a very successful report, so they then turned it into a series. I joined when you can see the covers change, actually, in 2016, and took it from, a thematic report, for example, on migration and cities, one topic, into a global reference report. So we've got a number of topics, and we've got key foundational chapters on migration and migrants, global overview, and we also have a regional chapter as well, which is, very widely downloaded and cited. It's published every 2 years. It's a highly collaborative process, as I've sort of mentioned. We work with academics from all around the world. It isn't a scholarly output. It is meant for a general audience. So we design it so that media can use it, so that policymakers can use it. I'm a former policymaker, so I like things that you can just snip and put into a PowerPoint slide, basically, and do a presentation on for your minister or your senior officials. So we designed it so that it could be used. It's open access. It's able to be downloaded. It's able to be used as long as it's not for commercial purposes. And we want it to be used by many out there. Between 2002 and 2026, it was just a thematic report, and it was often only published in one language. So when I took over, we had a couple of languages, especially the UN languages. There was French, English, and Spanish, but with the support of a whole range of different donors that have supported us in that work, we've been able to translate it into Arabic, Chinese. We've got English, French, Russian, Spanish, all of the UN languages, plus German, Italian, Korean, Portuguese, Swahili, particularly for sub-Saharan African countries, and also Turkish. And we've got a few logos there because we've won multiple international awards, particularly for our data visualization platform that we worked on. The first report was like 2022. These are some of the partnerships. One of the aspects that I certainly wanted to ensure was front and center within the research division within IOM in headquarters, and also replicated in the World Migration Report, is that we had diversity of views, diversity of disciplines and inputs. We had gender diversity as well as geographic diversity. And our team replicated that internally to make sure that we were also connecting to research, scholarly outputs, applied researchers all around the world, and bringing that knowledge and that expertise in. For the first time in the 2018 edition, we brought in academic reviewers. I think that personally is incredibly important to make sure that things are blind reviewed, that we are getting the toughest reviewers, the best scholars in the world, to be able to review the drafts so that we can actually reach a standard that is as high as we possibly can get. And also the external co-authors is really important. It's not just about academia, it's about what I call policy scholars. So those specialists and researchers who understand policy environments and can bring that research into those ecosystems for influence, which of course is one of the key reasons why we've worked with Rajan across multiple editions, because of his ability to understand the policy ecosystem as well as scholarly contributions. We do, of course, still work in academia, and actually we have a journal article coming out soon in a scientific journal, But to be building the World Migration Report, it has to be built for a very broad audience. We also work, of course, with IOM scholars, researchers from around the world, to make sure that the operational and applied and programmatic aspects are very tight. Yes, look at the chapter 1 title. We are in an era and a time of intense disruption and distortion. We have been facing this for some years now, and certainly for the full decade that I've looked after the World Migration Report, we've just seen it intensify over this period. Who's to say what will come? It's a great deal of uncertainty in terms of geosecurity, economic terms, social upheaval, transformations. And so we've situated this edition, the 2026 edition, within this environment. And you can see part 2 is where we change the chapters from edition to edition, and we choose the complex and emerging and some of the foundational issues. It is the first time that we have included migration and development within the World Migration Report series. So it is a very, very big topic, and we decided to take a particular kind of perspective, which is that it's a global asset that is at risk around the world strategically. We're also looking at irregular and regular migration pathways and thinking about different concepts related to regular migration. Climate mobility, unfortunately, but it's just a reality. We have had to do thematic chapters across the last 4 editions because it's a perennial issue. This one, we're looking really specifically at the local and community action that is taking place. Internal displacement, as many of you know, has increased tremendously over the last decade, exponentially. So internal displacement, we've taken a very, very close look at. And for the first time, again, we're looking at disability and migration because it's often sidelined, it's often pushed to the side and is not front and center, even though it's a critical issue for millions of people around the world. The global transformations that we talk about and we've brought into the World Migration Report to situate the analysis for the last several editions are the big ones around geopolitics, environmental transformations, and particularly climate change. Technological transformations, and we've seen artificial intelligence technologies really change our landscapes and our future outlooks tremendously, but also the demographic transitions that we're seeing all around the world, including as we're sitting here in Kerala and thinking about aging and aging populations. That's a critical issue, particularly as it relates to migration. As I mentioned here, these are the 4 big ones. We have a whole chapter. Chapter 1 is really looking at those in some detail. So I'd encourage, if you're interested in looking at this, particularly across a number of editions, to really look at how those are changing migration and displacement all around the world. The most significant one since the last edition has really been the big advances in artificial intelligence technologies. I personally have been working on AI for about 25 years within the Australian government, and certainly just before the Sydney Olympics, there was a whole lot of changes to our processing and our systems to facilitate that. But the last few years, we've seen artificial intelligence really, really change the landscape for migration. And we know in a multiple ways it will be changing the landscape, including around labour markets all around the world with generative AI and the potential for artificial superintelligence. The last one before I hand over to Rajan, I think this is something that we know. We've seen this graph many, many times before. We put it into the chapter because we can't not put it into the chapter. It's a picture tells 1,000 words. And this, for years and years, the World Bank and the IMF have been tracking international remittances. This is up until the end of 2022, I think, this particular graph with the last verified global. This is global data, but looking at low and middle income countries. And the story, of course, of remittances, the red line that trends right the way up and hasn't really been affected in a major way, despite predictions during GFC and the global financial crisis and COVID, has really remained resilient because of our globalized system. Official development assistance, on the other hand, which is the line at the bottom end there, has really tailed off. And when we look at future graphs on this with additional years, we will see actually that drop quite substantially. Official development assistance announcements for reductions are being made by countries, OECD countries, consistently. And the general trend is down for official development assistance. Foreign direct investment, definitely more affected by shocks and changes, but we have seen international remittances continue to grow. So part of the long-term data issue is really the jury is no longer out. The jury's in. It's very, very clear that migrants and diaspora are continuing to contribute to the sustainable development goals through international remittances, as well as a whole range of different areas that Rajan will take us through and we'll talk about in the chapter.
Okay.
No, that's fine. You can go.
I can do that? Okay.
Yep.
You want that policy thing?
We don't want that one.
Thank you, Marie, for the general introduction of the World Migration Report. In fact, this migration and development, this title is, I am very fascinated with the title because I was part of the knowledge network of migration and development with the NOMAD, with the World Bank. I was chairing the internal migration there. This migration development is always in my mind. And then, of course, we have a journal called Migration Development. Now, of course, the institute is also called the Migration Development, IMAD. So that this migration development is always in my, all the time. And now this time, after a long years, the World Migration Report have a chapter on that subject, migration and development. And of course, you can write hundreds of things there, but we have to limit to 20 pages, 9,000 words, it's like a big thing, And then, of course, because of the experience of the Kerala Migration Survey for almost running for 25 years now. And so I thought when she asked me, I said, yes, definitely I would like to be part of this particular chapter where I am more fascinated. So we got a lot of help from the IMAD team and other team and also the other authors. And this is, first of all, why we are talking them as asset. There are two reasons. Of course, I would like all of you to read the chapter. And I'm also talking to people if I can translate the chapter into Malayalam through some people so that it can be available for the people in some colleges to read Malayalam.
When she read out language symptoms, the whole report is translated. I was tempted to ask why not Malayalam?
No, but at least the chapter I will see.
So important, like any other language.
So, yeah. So, I think so. This why we thought about this global asset. This migration, we have two parts, not like the movie, part 1, part 2, but this because of course, part 2 sometimes does well than the part 1. Some of you know now. But this is, one is the migrants. The migrants are, we define them with remittances, which is like people who are sitting in Kerala, you know that we have close to 2.2 to 2.5 million. And they are at risk now. In fact, when the first bomb was put in the Gulf, there were 2 million phone calls from Kerala to Gulf. There are 2 million people. Everybody will call, somebody is there. Maybe uncle, maybe auntie, maybe father, maybe husband, maybe son. Like you can imagine 2 million calls. Can you imagine? That is risk. Otherwise, the 2 million calls will not go. Regular calls will go. But 2 million call in within few hours. What happened? Are you okay? That indicate that the number we are talking about. We talk about world migration, of course. And this is one category. We call them, in Kerala, our estimate is something like 2.5, which I believe underestimate because I believe it is an underestimate because there are many people who leave Kerala. They never come back to Kerala. I call them step migration. They go to Dubai, spend a few years, then they go to Canada. It's like Trivandrum to Canada via Dubai. Like we have some flights now. Trivandrum, Delhi via Bangalore. You have to wait for 3-4 hours. So the same thing. You wait, work for 3-4 hours, make money, go. I think, so we don't know them. They don't even return. We are not able to capture them even on return migration data. And then we have diasporas. They are no longer holding Indian passport. They are holding Canadian passport, other passport. but their heart is here. I think that is where we talk about Loka Kerala Sabha. You cannot put Keralites in the parallel living in Kerala. They are living everywhere. So you cannot put them in that Keralites live in Kerala. No, they are in the Loha, the whole world. They are there. They are now. Yesterday we had a meeting with NARCA. They said around 175 countries. You have at least one Malayali. So that indicate everywhere you are there. And that number we don't know, first of all. And my estimate based on the last KMS 23 was close to 5 million. It may go up, it may, in fact, I'm talking to the central government, we can think of a diaspora census, which require a lot of support system, diaspora census, because we don't know. Even the Ministry of External Affairs gives some 20 million, we think it's a cross underestimates. Because why I say cross underestimates, that's why I talk about database. Because I never knew that when the Kerala government, Indian government told me we have only 8 million people in the Gulf, I also believed it's correct. So 2 million from Kerala, so 1 out of 4 people in Gulf, 1 is a Malayali. Then I went to do a survey in Tamil Nadu, they got 2 million. 4 million, 2 states, something wrong. Then definitely 2 states are holding 4 million in the Gulf, then you have remaining 30 states only 4 million. So we are underestimating the actual migration in other countries. And similar to remittances, I was talking about 200,000 crores, which is a very big money, equivalent to 25% of the Kerala state income. So 25% of the Kerala state income is produced somewhere and coming in, and the economy reviving, which you heard from Joseph Little earlier. Of course, they are all at risk. Now, what we can do, we talk about SDG goals, we talk about many goals. I think we want to keep this strategic asset intact, but we can't do that. Somebody was telling me one tweet by Donald Trump that's it. One tweet is enough, completely gone. Or one visit to one country also completely gone. So it's like something like we are talking about G7, but we were making a joke. There was a G7. Then they were talking about G2, which is US and China. But somebody told they're not G2, now G1.5. China is 1, US is only 0.5. So it's all strategic, it's all global geopolitics are very, very important. G2, G3, BRICS, all those things. But everything there is a migration and diaspora. So what we can do in the policy making, we can reduce the remittance cost, which is also part of the sustainable development goals. Can you reduce the remittance cost so that you get more money through the formal channel? And many countries are not interested in a permanent migration. I think we should recognize that. People are talking about circular. In fact, even Kerala calls the people who are coming into Kerala, they call them guest. The guest means supposed to leave after a few years, because the guest means you can't stay permanently. Because guest, even if somebody comes to my house, I'll ask them, when are you going back? So, fine. That is the way we are talking about. We have to talk about thinking a circular migration. So, brain gain, which Joseph was talking, we have to talk about brain circulation. Brain can be circulated. How we can engage them. And then skills partnership. I think this is going to be a great value for the new government and the coming days on the knowledge economy. And also bringing back returned migrants. I think it's something Kerala has to do a lot of work. And we were talking in the morning in Imad with several people, was about 70% of the new companies coming in China are from NR, non-resident Chinese, because they have an incentive to bring them back. Here, we tell our children, somehow you adjust in UK, don't come. You adjust. And you come back, you can't manage. Should have somehow managed there, you are returned back. So this is something the new middle class parents coming back, but we welcomed Mahatma Gandhi. But we don't want to welcome our young people who go there and come back. Come, let us build Kerala. Let us build Kerala. I think this is something the new government and new policy, we have to really think when there is a crisis now. Look at the thing. Now, returned migrants are not only going to come from Gulf, which you used to have. close to 18 lakhs now, maybe 20 lakhs. But we are going to get skilled migrants from Germany. People are coming back. US, UK, because the policies, what we said, globally it is ruptured now. So we want them to come back. What way we can promote them? And also diaspora, because I always feel, I told even a meeting here in the last KMS presentation, I told Kerala underutilized the diaspora. I believe that we should have done wonders with them. Because I see them at the time of crisis. I saw them during floods. When Kerala was in crisis, and this I saw them in Pakistan through earthquakes and Gujarat. See, they are coming in, pouring money. You know that, people who are familiar at the time. 2018 floods, I think this is very important. They are coming in, but we have to organize them, welcome them, give the possibilities, give big projects like the Kannur airport. We come with a big project, you will get investment. But they're asking anything we can invest. What is that? Can you able to convince them so that you not only bring diaspora back, diaspora investment, because olden days are gone. Now the diaspora can invest any place. Why should they invest in India? They can invest in Dubai. Dubai is giving golden visas. So if you want to attract investment, not like the olden days, everybody will put their money to buy a house here, back here, buy land here. Now they have a lot of opportunities. So you have to be really attractive. And then the pensions, social protection is very, very important, because many of the people, returned migrants, I feel some of them are very poor now. Yesterday, I was sitting with a part of the discussion with Marie, with NARCA, the Labor Welfare Fund Board. They are giving 90,000 people a pension who completed. And they said, if you delay 2 days, they are coming. Sir, that pension, maybe 3,000 rupees or 5,000 rupees, that indicates they are in really vulnerable situations. I think we have to strengthen our social security for the returned migrants. How do you do? We have to really think. Now, and then I'm always based on the evidence-based. I think this is what I said I learned when I joined Center for Development Studies in 1987, when Professor Raj was the chairman, T. N. Krishna was the director. They used to tell us, CDS is known as a evidence-based policy. Evidence-based policy. We need more evidences. And even today we discussed, even we have evidences, it is not properly understood and properly not utilized. There is also another problem in the policy circle, where there is a political economy is playing. Something good you tell them, they will be unhappy. For example, I was talking with T.P. Srinivasan today morning, an hour. He said, I was promoting private education, I was chased out. But today, after 15 years, they would have done last time, probably we would not have so many students, probably not left. We don't know. So, there are evidences, but it's not happening. I think this is something very, very important. And then some highlights. That's what I would like to tell. They can make extraordinary contribution if you want to achieve all your SDGs goals in terms of education, in terms of women's schooling, in terms of housing, everything. If the migrant and diaspora communities going to contribute, done. I was telling, if you allow the people to move freely within the country, I was telling in a meeting in Tata Institute a few weeks back, Viksit Bharat should not be 2047, it should be 2037. Allow the people to move. Don't say Maharashtra is for Maharashtrian. You are not Kannadiga, go back from Karnataka. It's a similar thing. We are talking about America first. I think that mobility, if you allow them to make contribution, money is allowed to move, but now we are talking about FCNR. We had even the election last time. People want to invest. There are issues. There are barriers of people want to invest. People want to invest in education, invest in health infrastructure. And the infrastructure in Kerala's development, I think the diaspora has contributed. You like it or not. We have to document that contribution. Second thing, it also reduced poverty. You like it or not, it increased consumption, where the money is coming in. Consumption, education, healthcare. And we are talking about the women's education in North Kerala between last 20 years. You used to go there earlier, there were not many girls were going for higher education in Kannur, Palakkad, and those areas. Now you see, if you go to nursing institute, everybody is good. So there a lot of money is coming in, so that you are spending on food security, even creating income inequality. Even income inequality can be tuned towards migration remittances now. And also we can think now, especially for the Kerala knowledge economy, the right time, we can not only get transfer of money, we can also get transfer of knowledge. And if you allow the migration to be without barriers, of course, there are a lot of barriers. What way we can help our people to overcome that barrier so that we don't get irregular migration of Indians in other countries. But that's also a bad thing because people are brought by that special flight from US to Punjab. That was, yeah, because they are holding the same passport which I hold. So it's a India brand. The India brand is being, I think it's very important. So that we should tell them about regular pathways, which we have to talk about creating environment for people to pre-departure training. We are talking about pre-departure training, pre-departure orientation, so that the government and everybody who is involved in migration, they are part of the 3 phases. Pre-migration phase, and then while they are there, and the return phase. We can facilitate them in a much better way. I think they will still continue to be the asset. I think I am putting a question mark at risk. I don't want to say full stop. It's a risk, question mark. All depend upon how globally moving. Now something is happening, as Harila rightly said, what will happen to the 8 million people or 10 million people? And I know that some of them are sending their family back home, trying to look for your schools. And somebody asked, can I get an admission? See, we never thought about 1 month back. So much barriers, so much issues happening, and Kerala will be affected because Kerala is highly globalized. You like it or not, somebody sneezing in Dubai, you also get something feeling in your nose. That much Kerala is connected. I'll stop here and we'll open it for discussion with some comments from Professor Harilal. If you want to add, we'll open it up. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think this is going to be a big report. It has 8 chapters, but I thought we'll give you some essence. And also I would like to use the presence of Marie, who is in Trivandrum, to just expose to people that, we are able to collaborate with her. I think that's something very important, so that we should see what we can do in the future. I'll stop here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the brief presentations from both of you. You didn't take much time. And certainly, I'm sure that most of us will be reading the migration report and this particular chapter, because for scholars in Kerala, it's a must read, because this particular issue is so important for development of Kerala. I'm not really going to make detailed remarks on the presentation, but I'll just mention 1 or 2 things before I throw it open for discussion. And in fact, now we have many online participants, and we should be giving time to them. Certainly before I go for offline participants, we'll certainly come to you people first, online participants. Let me be very brief. In fact, no, Professor Joseph might have already told you about the work we have done long back, and then, of course, many others have written about the Dutch disease impact of migration on Kerala. And in fact, no, it's part of the larger resource cost thesis. And people are quite familiar about the framework. I don't need to really go into that. But from our studies, not only me and Joseph, there are other people who have written. Recently, Parameswaran had written a paper updating our framework and database. So basically, the message is that generally it was felt that migration will always be beneficial to recipient regions. We told that it need not be. It can be a curse. It can very badly affect, in fact, the goods producing sectors, because the migration and the remittances can, in fact, drive up cost of production, wages and prices of non-tradables, and it can affect the goods producing sectors in the migrant sending regions. which has been the experience of many countries. So there is this risk. But then there are policy options to really get out of this trouble. Kerala, in fact, experienced this death disease impact, and for about 20 years, more than 2 decades, our agriculture and manufacturing suffered very badly because of high land prices, because of high wages, shortage of skilled workers, etc. But after that period, we started becoming immune to the high cost of production, because now we moved on to industries and activities which can afford to pay reasonably good wages. And of course, reverse migration also came. So the equations got changed. Now, let me not go into the details of the Dutch disease kind of arguments. Let me also mention about another work of ours, one of which I've written with Akhil, who is participating in this meeting. That is about deterritorialization of Kerala. In fact, no, many of these migrant sending regions are already deterritorialized. In fact, societies, Kerala, for example, Kerala is not living within the confines of the physical boundaries of Kerala. If you want to really think about Kerala, you'll have to think of it as a global phenomenon, because Keralites are everywhere and Kerala is living everywhere in the world. The culture of Kerala is getting reproduced, language, everything is getting reproduced in every part of the world. So if you want to really think about Kerala, its future, its development, its literature, then you'll have to have a global scale to think about it. That's what we try to argue in that paper. Now, we can probably discuss these things later. And then Professor Rajan was mentioning about short-term migration. In fact, no, if you consider the WTO negotiations, the trade in services, the General Agreement on Trade in Services, GATS, there's a particular mode of trade in services, that is movement of natural persons, mode 4. And mode 4 is about movement of temporary persons. In fact, WTO developed countries always wanted to encourage short-term movement of people. But there is a problem there. When you promote short-term movement of people, in fact, the receiving countries or receiving employers will be trying to avoid the social security costs, retirement costs, etc. That's one very direct way of cheapening labor power. So when we discuss labor and its movements, it's very important to discuss about movement of capital, because the story will not be complete if you take one part. What is happening to capital? How capital is interested in movement of people? How, when migration increase, how local wages will be affected, how profits will be affected, how it will affect accumulation process. These are all very important questions. And we should realize that the world accumulation, global accumulation process, in fact, encourages migration, and it may even encourage illicit migration of undocumented people, migration of casual labor, temporary labor, where wages can be low, and that can affect home workers also. So that's a larger problem of laborers, working people everywhere. So these issues probably we'll have to discuss. I'll just stop here. We will take 2-3 questions from online participants first, and then we'll come back to our audience here. Please, can you introduce yourself and please raise your hand, introduce and
Folks, message is not restored from here. Abhilash. Um, Yeah. You are also free to put your questions in the chat box.
Maybe,
I think we have our youngsters here. I think we always have a tendency of forgetting those who are nearer to you and always look for who are far away. And that is a problem since it is a migration issue, you should always look for people who are far away. That's the point. So now let's come back to the youngsters.
we'll have the first question here and then
Right,
we'll go to the.
that's right. If there's anything in the chat box, you can. Your mic is off. That's right. Yeah.
So we can have one or two questions here because now the online participants are getting ready.
I think since for you to give a minute for thinking, I personally feel that very often than not, we consider migration as a kind of bringing financial resources. In earlier, the Gulfies used to come with a huge, luggage, and later they started sending money through the bank. Now, I think the world that we are living in, and particularly the Gen Z world, am I right? Your world is a world wherein what is the most important resource? What is the most important resource? 10 acre of land? No. A factory?
Cockroach.
Cockroach. In your generation, the most important resource is knowledge. Most important resource is knowledge. And where do we get the knowledge from? In Kerala, it is all coming through mugging up the textbook. That's what we are doing. That has to change. Real learning is a process of interaction. Learning a true learning has to come through touching, feeling, experiencing. That we never do, in fact. We mug up. And the people, we have two types of knowledge. If one is the scientific knowledge, which is documented, which can be easily transferred, we can mug it up. And in scientists, we talk about research and development, etc. Equally important is actually scientific knowledge, as in what is called experience-based knowledge. So these migrants, in fact, if you want to think about development in the coming years, if you are not looking at the knowledge, and the most important potential source which is at risk is actually the migrants. They have a global, say for example, what is the difference between, I don't know which college are you from, you and a student in Harvard or in Yale? Because the interactive space that you get in Harvard is very different. I remember once a paper fell from my hand, I took the paper and gave to that old man. That man happened to be a Nobel Prize winner. That is the interactive space that you get in Yale. So the interactive space that these non-resident Keralites, non-resident Indians and their networks provides, that provides for Kerala and rest of the country. And how are you going to effectively harness that for future? I don't care about the amount of dollars that they bring. So money is important, of course. But what is more important is this. So I think that is something which, when you talk about migration, then when you talk about brain drain, brain gain, brain circulation, this matters a lot. In fact, that is actually what is the U generation. I think you may be having some perspective on that, some questions on that. It's a very wide, when you talk about migration and development, migration, as Professor Rajan rightly said, it takes to a very wide range of uncharted terrains. In fact, Professor Harilal and the whole idea of Loga Kerala Sabha is actually an institutional architecture to harness that. In fact, I think it is Harilal and Akhil, they first wrote about it. So what I'm trying to say that this is, fresh thinking is good. And if you cannot think in terms of going with the frameworks developed in the brick and mortar economy in the world of digital world and whatever it is. Anyway, so I thought I will flag up this to the.
I just had a question, primarily out of curiosity, but, with Professor Rajan as well as, Professor K. N. Harilal actually, were, highlighting. We normally expect a kind of, positive correlation between, concentration of capital and, as well as, labor. So how is that, happening in the current, context? If you plot on the one hand, the concentration of capital as well as the labor. So how does, it go? What are the other kind of, determinants, like, the threat, law and order, meaning the different, cultural kind of, things intervene. That is number one. Second one, in the global discussion on migration, we have, we often concentrate on, the mainstream, but, leaving around huge continents like, Africa is no more in our frame, like, Latin America is out of frame. So how do you, those kind of, interactions also, how do you bring it from the larger, context?
Yeah, so certainly for the World Migration Report, we absolutely cover the entire world, and we have a regional chapter that looks at the 6 continents. So we focus specifically on Africa, specifically on Northern America, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and so forth. So we do analysis of the global data and disaggregate it right the way through. It's the key kind of, and I encourage you to have a read of the report, but it's the key kind of global trends and data points. So international migrants, we do sex disaggregation. We started to bring that into the report in around 2020 because the gender issue is really very significant and it's changing over time. We look at internal displacement and cross-border displacement, as well as international remittances. And then actually Rajan and I worked on a COVID chapter. I think it was the COVID follow-up chapter, wasn't it? Another year last time for the 2024 edition.
Bouncing back.
And so we actually brought in a huge range of mobility as well. And what we saw was it's very different in sub-Saharan Africa compared to other parts of the world, including because they have a lot more informal movements. Cross-border traders, for example, were deeply affected by international migration in the African continent, which was very different to other parts of the world. I mean, of course, for India, it was internal migration, which was a huge issue, of course, in terms of borders going up and changes being implemented. But we certainly do. One of the things that I've found over the last 10 years is there's a very different discussion in Latin America and the Caribbean because it's mainly in Spanish. It's really interesting. Whereas most of the other countries around the world, you've got civil society and senior officials who need it in language. They need the official language of that country to be able to utilize the report. But academia tends, and applied researchers tend to work in English or in French in most of the rest of the world, but not in Latin America and the Caribbean. So it's actually it's almost like a parallel discussion. There's a whole range of parallel kind of like research that is going on. And part of the World Migration Report is to bring that in. So we actually use not just, obviously, it goes without saying in so many ways, but we don't just use English literature that feeds into the report. We use in different languages that is brought in so that we can actually use the analysis, whether it's from China or whether it's from Uruguay or whether it's from different parts of the world. So that's like really important. But the narrative is different. That's one that I would put because it's really dominated by Spanish language. Was there another one?
The language barrier.
Yeah, the language barrier is kind of big. Oh, this one. Yeah, there's a question online. Thanks for the question. On students. International students were largely ignored, I must admit, for a long time in the World Migration Report until COVID. Because do you remember during COVID, international students were really stuck and the mobility issues were really front and center in so many different parts of the world. So we started to bring in, straight after COVID, we brought in global analysis of international student trends, also because it's also increased like dramatically. It's a really big industry globally, as we know now. So we use the UNESCO global data and we disaggregate that again by sex because there's a really interesting sex difference, and the female international student migration has increased over time. But when you disaggregate it by region, it's quite different in different locations around the world. So we've got in chapter 2, it's the global chapter, we've got quite a lot on international student mobility and migration.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, because I think what Marie said about international student migration. In fact, in our 1998 survey, we had student migration, but it was interstate migration. So we never discussed much about that. Interstate, within the country, people were in, Mumbai, Bangalore, the hub cities. But, so we had the data coming up, but in 2023, first time we realized it is like, it's a big chunk. If there would have been no student migration, in fact, the total migration would have been come down because your demography is gone. Now what happened? Your aged migration has come down to the lower ages. Now the people are leaving after 15, 16, going for. So I think that is something we brought out, and I was very glad after our 2023 report, there was a debate in the assembly, and it led to a lot of policy changes, even talking about recruitment, NARCA, I think, and now they are talking about websites. I think we ignored them because the number was not big. But I think now it is very big. And also they suffered. In fact, they suffered in the sense that many students were starving during COVID-19 in UK. After paying 25 lakhs to that university, you are starving, waiting for somebody will give you food. Of course, diaspora was helping them. I think, that time. And then it was realized by all of us during the Russian war. When Russian war, our Indian students were standardized, Yeah. So what happened before the war, I was looking at the External Affairs website. They said India has 4,000 students. Before the war. After the war, the minister comes and says, I brought 22,000 students. You see that the database. So we are underestimated by, because everywhere people are there. And it's not only student migration from Kerala, even Haryana had 1,000. So about 1,000 people outside students were almost 18 states. So we are always thinking only Kerala people. No, it's a new middle class which is coming up in India. We call them, of course, a new middle class means one child family. Everything is for the one child. Okay, you want to go to London? Please go. You want to go, okay, that's what is called them child crafting. You have only one child, whatever you want, done. Earlier, we were 4 children. If I want to go to study outside, I can't go. If you have only one, I think this is something very, very important, that whole changing demographic shift, which is also creating heavy student migration. Yeah, here no, only one.
Okay. I don't have questions. I have few comments. Basically, the entire discussion on migration and development is often kind of, we should link that to the state policy. Whether it is, incentivizing the remittance, or transferring the knowledge, or engaging the diaspora, bringing FDI, we should definitely, connect with or discuss in terms of why, states are bilaterally not discussing, or multilaterally not discussing about these things. And nowadays, going the terms like assets and everything, there is an embedded feeling that, the global south is there to supply labor, and, development is no more means kind of building productive capacity at the home countries. So, I mean, that is well and good. Okay, we don't have problem with this discussion. Then that is my first kind of, argument regarding the question, or regarding the, discussion on migration development, and linking that with the global asset sort of argument. Second thing is regarding the temporariness of labor and the mobility of capital. I mean, Dr. Harilal and others also discussed about the influence of capital, mobility of capital on the mobility of labor. Of course, it's being influenced by the mobility of capital. And from our readings and our studies and all, we have identified certain patterns of capital, like it's now capital is more transnational, and they want the labor to be more liquid, as much as liquid as possible. If they need labor, they want to bring in labor. They don't want, then send them back. So that is why we should connect that with the increasing temporariness in the international mobility, that the MMPs and, the reluctance of the state to promote the home countries to promote the permanent movers. And nobody wants permanent movers. They are into 3-year, 5-year contracts. And I definitely think that, and we have evidence as well to connect that, it is to serve the interest of the capital as well, because maybe it could be for the infrastructure projects or other labor intensive projects, and, bring in people for the project and send them back. And if they need it again, maybe in another location and send them there. And so, as Dr. Harlal said, rightly pointed out, and migration discussions should be linked to the FTA negotiations and mode 4 discussions. And that does not happen at all. At the global, I mean, if we take the IMRF or GCN negotiation, we only discuss about migration. We do not discuss about the trade agreements at all. And that is why we are still stuck with, IMRF is whatever comes in IMRF. It's all about engaging, consider, and, especially on social protection. I was so surprised to see, they always talk about social protection. I mean, ILO is seriously pushing for social protection for the migrant workers, and sadly, in the IMRF document, the final one also, I was really surprised. They just said consider. Countries can consider, but we are not thinking about enforceable mechanism or monitoring mechanism to see, I mean, social protection is being seriously considered at bilaterally or multilaterally. And another feeling is that, the regional agreements like Colombo process, Abu Dhabi dialogue, and all these regional processes are literally dying. And so we had a lot of hope, I mean, in the early 20th century, that, these regional negotiation and even the Bali process as well, that will bring some change, and that will bring countries from the global south, I mean, both or destination and origin countries from the global south, they could sit together and discuss, and, maybe for a safe and regular pathways and all. But that never happened. I don't know, maybe due to the interest of, again, we'll go back to the capital discussion again. But that is where we are now. The migration and mobility agreements are bilateral now, and it's really connected to the FTAs and other interests of the capital, and we are stuck there. So it's time, and also the space for academia and civil society in these negotiations are shrinking. In the case of India, and Dr. Rajan must be able to say, I mean, we had a lot of space to discuss and engage with our data, with our evidences. And now ME is literally hardly invites, I mean, for the policy decision, except there are exceptions, some programs and seminars, but we don't have role as well. So I think it's time to advocate such things as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Akhil, because you're bringing in state policy, interstate system, and migration governance. These are very, very important issues, because we are, after all, discussing about human beings, movement of people. It's okay that we discuss about assets, quantities of material being moved here and there. That's all important. But then when we speak about migration, we are speaking about people and their rights. And somehow, we are not hearing enough about the human side of the story. That's why I thought, I should mention about the Middle East war now. We discuss everything about the war and the movement of energy prices, modern technologies of war, so many such things. But then so many people are there, from different parts of the world working there. And what will happen to them? That's not in the discussion on Gulf War. That's true of even the Ukraine war. So yeah, thank you for raising those issues.
Yeah. What we are seeing is we're seeing a really very significant drop in humanitarian assistance. I mean, it's far worse than official development assistance. So if we're talking about the humanity kind of aspects, if we look outside of migration, and particularly labor migration, student migration, family reunification, if we look at displacement, the world is in a very dark place. That's a whole nother discussion. It's Bottoming out, humanitarian assistance is absolutely cascading. Conditionality is increasing. So conditionality started to enter into official development assistance agreements, many years ago, as we know. But I did an event with the Public Forum for the World Trade Organization a couple of years ago, and they're starting to get conditionality enter into trade agreements, bilateral trade agreements and multilateral trade agreements. And what I mean by conditionality is we will only provide you as a developing country, a donor country, official development assistance if you agree to take back your, whatever it might be, failed asylum seekers or, irregular migrants of some description. Otherwise, we won't be handing over. We won't be dealing with you on trade, and we won't be dealing with you in terms of official development assistance. So the spaces are not only shrinking, but they're changing in real time. And this is why geopolitical global transformations I put right at the very top, because it isn't about, the focus is not on human rights anymore. There's several short articles that I've written for the World Economic Forum on this. The turn has been about geopolitical self-interest by particular countries. I visited a development assistance for a donor country, development assistance agency on my way through to India. And I had to, which I thought was a bit surprising to be perfectly honest, but had to outline to them that development does not apply to developing countries when you're talking about migration and development, because you have, as a really wealthy country, you have benefited from decades and decades and decades of development from migration. You have a very high proportion of your national population that are international migrants. It's around 30%. It's not the Gulf, but it's around 30%. But you don't think about it in terms of how you, as a wealthy country, has developed on the basis of international migrants. You've brought in skills, labor, and we know that migrants self-select. So you've often got very highly innovative migrants who self-select to move overseas, but that's not the way you think about it. This country actually is a very large remittance sending country. So they're in the top 10 in the world. But they also have their neighboring countries, which are also OECD, DAC, EU countries, in the top 10 receiving countries in the world, Germany and France, because of the cross-border workers and the salaries that are transferred. But we apply a lens on migration and development, which is a very unusual lens in so many respects, but we don't think outside of that to think beyond developing and developed countries, because it applies to everybody, but developed countries often don't want to think about it, or they don't want to acknowledge it. And we are seeing the world go in a completely different direction, which is heavy, heavy, heavy and conditionality and squeezing out increasingly, and there's a whole chapter on this in the 2024 edition, migration equality. We are seeing fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer opportunities from migrants from countries who are really at the bottom end of the Human Development Index, and it's increasing. So we've got a really difficult trend. I would say knowledge, I hate to put a dampener on it, but I will. Knowledge is really tricky now because of AI. Because knowledge is now globalized and it's done through LLMs, and access to knowledge is now in the hands of many multinational organizations who are extracting data through their data centers and the data workers who are working on global platforms, and then it's being used to basically sell products. So we've got a really big challenge when it comes to artificial intelligence technologies, particularly around this area, while at the same time we have jobs being automated because of generative AI. So you've got, again, closing of narrower pathways, including for people who normally would be able to migrate internationally if they chose to. So I think you said tough times ahead. I would agree with tough times ahead. I think it's going to be extremely challenging, and there's going to be a lot of need for innovation and rethinking.
It's
about
going to be
conceptual
challenging and tough
frameworks.
because
It is.
in the crisis can occur on both sides, because when accumulation is happening one-sided in few countries, then it cannot continue because of internal problems. There will be consumption crisis, realization crisis, So one should think about distribution. Otherwise, one-sided accumulation will not survive. It will lead to all kind of problems. And then finally, it will be like Trump behaving on the world scene. The Trump is behaving in such a manner because of the internal crisis, accumulation crisis in USA. So, the country is becoming unpredictable, even to the neighbors, even to their own friends, this transactional approach of Trump. So it's not a question of the issue of sending countries or receiving countries also. So more questions? Or should be?
You can introduce. Yeah, my name is Yusuf Awad. I'm an international student at the University of Kerala. I come from Sudan, actually. I'm studying here. So I have a question in the context of illegal migration, especially from Sub-Saharan Africa and the Horn of Africa to Europe in particular. We talked about brain drain, brain gain, and brain circulation. So when I talk about the Horn of African countries like my country, Sudan, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Mauritania, etc., and the Horn of Africa, Mali, Burkina Faso, and these countries, people there face many kind of difficulties and hardship, oppression, discrimination, religious problems, wars, displacement, etc. So when they leave these countries and take the risky journey, whether through Morocco, Libya, or through Turkey there, or now Russia also, from Russia they go to Belarus, from Belarus to Germany there. They go there with hate in their hearts. They don't want to go back to these countries ever because of the things that they face. Even me as Sudanese studying in India here, if I get a chance to get an Indian nationality, I will stay here because of the hardships I faced in my country before coming here. So how can we, in case our countries develop, how can we convince those migrants who took this risky and fatal journey to go back again and we can make gain from their brains? This is one question. Another question, most of the legal migrants who go to Europe illegally, they are uneducated, unfortunately, from Sub-Saharan Africa and from the Horn of Africa. How they are benefiting the European countries there. I think now in the news and open news, I see many right-wing activists talking about the migrants destroying the Christian culture in Europe there and destroying the societies in Europe there because of the difference of the culture. The crimes rates are going high and many criminal activities are happening. They have been attributed to the migrants by the activists, right-wing activists in Europe there. Thank you.
Firstly, Eastern Horn of Africa is not like any other region in the world. We've studied that, and actually, our co-partner for the research project that I'm here for is actually based in Nairobi, and she covers Eastern Horn of Africa, the African Migration and Development Policy Center. So we were working on Kenya as part of this project as well, Sri Lanka, Kerala, and also Kenya. But Eastern Horn of Africa is not like any other region in the world. When you look at the World Migration Report and you can see the African continent, within Africa, Eastern Horn of Africa has very high levels of cross-border displacement, of course, because of mainly, not only, but mainly because of conflict-induced violence and cross-border displacement, internal and over borders. It has countries that have some of the highest levels of refugees, both as origin and also as host country. And that doesn't occur anywhere else in the world because displacement due to conflict and violence is so extreme. Education levels of irregular migrants, it varies by cohort, and the cohorts can shift quite dramatically. We have seen through the Mediterranean, especially, very big changes over time. I've worked on that for a very, very long time. And we've seen from people who are being faced, war zone areas from Sudan, for example, South Sudan, when that was occurring, through to Mali, people from West and Central Africa coming up through routes and through Libya, for example. But we've also seen very large numbers of South Asians come through those routes, including Bangladeshis in particular, and so on. So it just depends on what is going on, how smugglers in particular and human traffickers are selling products and how successful they are. The education levels can be quite varied. It just depends on the cohort. But the big issue is, as we've seen over time, the analysis that we did for the 2024 report is 25 years. So from 1995 through to 2020, we've seen pathways absolutely narrow. So most people, if they have a passport, because a lot of people don't have documents, if they have a passport, thinking particularly of Afghans, my PhD is on Afghan Hazaras, they usually can't get a travel document, but if they do have a travel document, they have almost no chance of getting any type of visa whatsoever. So the only way that you can actually travel if you are desperate to move to another country for many people is to get on a boat. So the choices are very, 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 very slim. And that situation is just getting worse and worse. At the other end of the spectrum, for destination countries, it causes huge issues, obviously politically, and we see dis and misinformation again and again and again on international migration constantly. A lot of research that is produced by alt-right is countered by evidence that is accurate around crime rates, for example, often doesn't hold up. For example, it's often targeted and it's twisted, but it's used for malicious purposes, for anti-migrant sort of like sentiment. But we do know that the black economies in the big destination countries often use, employers use and exploit irregular, undocumented migrants. And that occurs in the United States, that occurs in Australia, that occurs in European countries, because there's always a need for it for cheap labor. And we saw that very clearly during COVID, because the people who kept societies running during COVID were not only kind of like the lowest skilled migrants, but many of them were undocumented. Many of them had no status, and they were keeping our societies running successfully. They were like delivering, they were transport workers, they were working in the health sector, in allied professions. They were helping with translation services. They were helping as domestic workers, in different people's homes and aged care facilities. That really came to the surface, that it wasn't just migrants who were ensuring that societies were running. They were the most essential workers keeping societies going. Many of them were undocumented. And let's not get into the gender discussion, because then I'll get really kind of like, because it was often women migrant workers who were undocumented, who were keeping, like they were picking the vegetables and the fruit as the whole world turned, and they were getting all these kind of exemptions. Oh yes, exempt. Yes, you're undocumented, but we need you to go and pick that, broccoli or whatever it is, because otherwise societies would be falling apart. What have we learned from COVID? It's like the evidence was before us, and we haven't changed the policies, and we haven't changed the practices, and we haven't changed the systems, and we had a big wake-up call. And nothing was done about it, to be perfectly honest. It didn't really change the dynamics. Everybody just went back to their boxes.
Yeah, I think this is very important. What she said, we never learned from the COVID experience. But I was talking to some returned migrants. They said, you only talk about us when there is a crisis. Yeah. You talked about economic crisis, then you forget about us. Then COVID crisis, now you are not talking about us, because I said, there is no crisis, man. And the TV studio everywhere, prime time, they'll talk about return migration. Now, no.
In fact,
it's very sad.
Crisis is part of the system. Like,
Exactly.
Unnotified people are migrating illegally without documents and all. That's part of the system. In fact, if you had read about U.S. agriculture, particularly in the southern area, without Mexican illegal migrants, agriculture cannot be there. So it's a regular feature. So this should be true of Africa also.
Yeah. And also it is, what we see it, this undocumented migration in the Gulf and it's also some type of a parallel labor market. I call them shadow labor. It's a parallel labor market is working. They are looking for those people. They are looking for those people without paper, then they can tell them, like that, because they know. But, this is something like, using them. So it is like a part and parcel of what I call them a labor mafia. Like we have land mafia, we had always in the cities, land mafia. So I call them like a labor mafia. I'll stop here maybe with the mafia.
Like those who are engaged in smuggling.
Yeah.
The workers. Now, once you are into that labor force, Yeah, you are there. But then you are taken care, you're part of a gang and you'll be given jobs again and again. The quotation work will be given. The system is acknowledging their presence. So let us now, Professor Joseph will
No, I think,
say a few
this,
words and conclude.
yeah, I think we must, every nice thing must, you have anyone?
Yeah,
Oh, please, you're
Okay.
welcome. Yeah, right.
The international student.
Okay, so my name is Adam Muhammadi. I'm from West Africa. I'm from Mali. I'm an international student like Yusuf and Tosif here. I'm doing BBA. So first, thank you for your presentation. So my question is, like he said, definitively, we know that most people that migrate is African, right? So when you go to Europe, like when you come to Africa, African biggest institute, you'll find foreigners working there, right? And all African that like skilled African migrates abroad for better opportunity, which is often described as brain drain. However, if you look at many major institutes and companies in Africa, you also find many foreign professionals working there. So, in your opinion, how can African countries can manage this situation and face the challenge for retaining local talent while still benefiting from international perspectives? Like my question is, in Africa, we have many people that have educated, their intelligence, they migrate in European countries, right? And when you come to Africa, in African biggest institute, you find those European, those foreign working there. So how can we tell to our people that our people to stay here and try to do something than going there?
You want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I've never heard of any African country try and prevent individuals from migrating, especially skilled migrants. I mean, you've got macro level issues, then you've got the meso level, and you've got the micro level, the household issue. To be able to try and prevent people from migrating internationally who are working, particularly the health sector. I mean, we all know that the global health sector is very under-resourced in terms of skills. And doctors and nurses are high demand everywhere around the world in lots of different economies. But to try and prevent those people, I don't think I've ever heard any country in the world try and prevent it. It's about trying to make sure that they can migrate safely and not go through the irregular migration pathways. That is really critical. So lots of countries try and prevent that. They don't want their citizens smuggled and they don't want their citizens trafficked, that is for sure. But to forge safe and meaningful lives through international migration is often a very strong asset, really. Like it's a very strong kind of predictive support system for broader communities. And we've seen international remittances, increase tremendously over time to low and middle income countries, including because official development assistance from OECD countries has just bottom lined. So there's got to be foreign direct investment coming in as well as international remittances. The challenge is, in terms of brain drain, to make sure that there are often the skills and the opportunities, and that's why we've seen countries like Rwanda, for example, really focus on IT and artificial intelligence strategies. Investment is really big. In West Africa, it's obviously Ghana is the big country that has really focused on, skills development. A lot of people might migrate initially and then they return home. They have a very strong kind of return focus. The Gambia is another one where they actually have a diaspora parliament. So they have members of the diaspora community who are actually able to contribute to running the country. So there's a lot of very interesting policy responses that are going on, but I think that big issue in terms of preventing individuals from migrating internationally. I've never heard any country, at least openly, talk about that as one of their sort of policy determinants. Not at all. It's more about incentivizing behaviors, attracting return migrants, attracting foreign direct investment, diaspora bonds and support, while also enabling individuals and households to benefit from international migration. So it is a challenge, I would say.
No. It was a nice discussion on a very contemporary, highly relevant issue. And very happy that youngsters raised very pertinent questions. And I think, we often get carried away or very much impressed by the outcome. But the process of migration, how many lose their life on the way, we rarely study that. But I think I wish we have a world of true globalization, which I started with. And if people from Bengal can come and benefit here or no, and if people from Bihar can come and benefit, both Kerala get benefited, they get benefited. Is it? It's a mutually beneficial game. I see, in fact, migration should be and must be seen as a mutually beneficial game, and wherein if capital cannot have any barriers to mobility, so also labor. You cannot afford to have a kind of biased globalization wherein, as I said, and you generation, it is your job to see it and to create a new world which doesn't differentiate. So I think, I'm sure Dr. Rajan has a big job to do now and another study. So thank you very much for joining. I think Professor Godwin is here from KEA. A lot of colleagues have joined, Akhil, and is very passionate about the problem, and all our youngsters. I'm very happy that you raised these pertinent issues, in fact, and these are issues on which, our attention should be. These are not to be kept under the carpet. These are to be openly said, in fact. So it was a very productive afternoon. I think I hope that we are more enlightened on the issue at 3:50 than what we were at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much, Maria. I mean, it was very nice. Rajan, thank you for facilitating you. Thank you, everybody. Send the new file first.